Samuel Carter had lived alone on his ranch for many years, long enough to know every sound the land made. He knew the whistle of dry wind sliding through the fence posts, the soft shuffle of dust moving across the yard, and the tired creak of his old barn door as it leaned from years of use. Life on the edge of the Arizona plains was never easy, but Samuel had made peace with the solitude. He had learned to live with less, speak only when needed, and trust his instincts. Those instincts kept him alive, and they usually guided him well. But the day he saw two small figures near his fence line, something told him his quiet life was about to change. The afternoon sun was heavy, spreading a dull gold light over the ranch. Samuel was walking the property, checking the water lines to see if the small amount of water he had left was still flowing. He carried a metal bucket in one hand and wiped sweat from his brow with the other. The drought had lasted far longer than anyone predicted. Streams had dried, wells had lowered, and some ranchers nearby had already abandoned their land. Samuel refused to give up, even though each month felt harder than the last. His herd had shrunk, and at this point he only had one horse left. Everything he owned seemed to be hanging by a thin thread. As he bent down to tighten a pipe, he heard something, a light sound, quick and soft, like someone moving behind the bushes. Samuel froze for a moment. Coyotes often wandered this far, and deer sometimes came for the little water he still had. But this sound was different. It had hesitation in it, fear, maybe even pain. He stood up slowly. His eyes scanned the area, and that's when he noticed movement near the fence. Two small shapes, faint and blurry against the bright sun, crouched low behind a cluster of bushes. Samuel squinted and took a cautious step forward. The shapes pulled back as if hiding. He set down the bucket gently so it wouldn't make noise and approached with steady steps. When he got close enough, he saw them clearly for the first time, two Apache sisters, no more than 13 or 14 years old. Their faces were dusty and tired. Their clothes were worn from travel, and their hands were tightly gripped together, as if they feared letting go would separate them. One of the girls had an injured foot wrapped in a piece of cloth that had darkened from the dirt of the journey. The other girl stood in front of her, as though shielding her from anything that might approach. They looked at Samuel with wide, cautious eyes. They didn't speak at first. They simply watched him, uncertain what this lone rancher might do. There had been tension in the region for months. Many settlers were nervous, and some reacted harshly toward anyone who wasn't from their own community. Samuel understood why the girls were afraid. Their world and his were different, and misunderstandings between the two sides were common. But Samuel also knew fear when he saw it, and the fear in their eyes wasn't of him, it was of the world they had just escaped. He raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. "You don't need to be scared," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." The older sister looked at him closely, studying his tone and face. Her eyes softened only a little, but it was enough to show she was listening. The younger girl winced when she tried to adjust her injured foot, and Samuel noticed how she held back tears. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "Let me help." The older sister shook her head at first, unsure whether they could trust him. She whispered something to the younger one in their language. Samuel didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion. They were not just tired, they were lost. He stepped back a little to give them space. "I have water," he said. "It's just inside the yard. You're welcome to it." He didn't move closer. Instead, he turned and walked slowly toward his barn, giving them the choice to follow or not. He knew that forcing them would only make things worse. Kindness couldn't be rushed. A few moments later, he heard footsteps, two sets of them following cautiously behind him. When he reached the barn, he filled a clay cup with water from a small barrel. The girls hesitated near the doorway until he gave a small nod. They stepped inside carefully, still alert but slightly calmer. The younger sister drank first, her hands shaking as she held the cup. When she finished, she handed it to the older sister, who took a slower sip. Samuel watched them quietly, not wanting to overwhelm them with questions. After a few minutes, the older girl looked up at him and finally spoke in broken English. "We got separated," she said softly. "Our family, They move away from trouble. We tried to follow. Then, we lost them. Her voice was thin, almost like she had used up her strength just by explaining. Samuel nodded with understanding. He had heard rumors of a skirmish nearby. Nothing major, but enough to send families running from the area. The land was unpredictable. Misunderstandings could cause fear to spread quickly. In moments like that, young ones could easily become separated from their group. "Where were you heading?" Samuel asked gently. The older girl shook her head. "We don't know. Our father, he was ahead with others. We think they moved east." She looked down, clearly worried. "We walked all night. My sister hurt her foot." Samuel looked at the girl's foot again. The makeshift wrapping was loose and dusty, so he knelt down carefully. "May I check?" he asked. The younger girl hesitated but then nodded. Samuel unwrapped the cloth slowly and saw the foot was swollen, likely from twisting it while walking on rough ground. It wasn't broken, but she couldn't travel on it easily. He wrapped it again with clean cloth and tied it properly. "You'll be okay," he said with a reassuring smile. "But you shouldn't walk far." The sisters exchanged a worried glance. They knew they had far to go if they wanted to reach their family. Samuel understood their fear without them saying a word. The land between his ranch and the open plains wasn't friendly to anyone traveling alone, especially two young girls with limited supplies. "You can rest here for tonight," Samuel said. "I'll make sure you're safe." The girls didn't respond right away, but he saw relief flicker across their faces. Safety was something they desperately needed at that moment. Samuel gave them bread and fruit from his pantry and set up a small area in the barn with blankets so they could rest comfortably. The barn was old, but it was warm and quiet, a safe shelter from the long journey they had endured. That evening, as the sun slipped below the horizon, the ranch became peaceful again. The sky filled with soft pink and orange colors, reflecting the calm that had settled over the land. Samuel sat on the porch for a while, thinking about the unexpected turn the day had taken. He didn't know much about the girls' tribe or their customs, but he knew he couldn't let them travel alone. Not with one injured and both exhausted. The sisters fell asleep quickly, the kind of deep sleep that comes only after days of worry. Samuel checked on them once more before heading to his own room. He listened to the quiet breathing coming from inside the barn and felt a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. As he lay down, he thought about what he should do next. Helping them was the right thing, but he knew it could bring questions or complications from others who didn't understand. Still, he had always believed that kindness should never be held back because of fear. He drifted to sleep with that thought in mind, not knowing that the next day would bring a decision that could change his entire life. The land outside the ranch stayed silent through the night, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen when morning came. The night passed slowly for Samuel. He woke up before dawn, long before the sun even touched the sky. It was a habit he had kept for years, but this morning felt different. There was a quiet weight in the air, something that made him pause as he put on his boots. He stepped outside, feeling the coolness of early morning settle across the land. The stars were fading, and a soft gray light hovered near the horizon. Normally, this was his favorite time of day. But today, his thoughts were heavy. He walked toward the barn quietly, wondering whether the two sisters had slept peacefully. The ground was still cool beneath his feet. As he approached the barn door, he heard gentle breathing inside, steady and calm. It brought him a strange sense of comfort. They were safe, and that mattered. When he slid the barn door open, a faint beam of morning light spilled inside. The older sister stirred first, sitting up with a tired but alert expression. She watched Samuel for a moment, as if still unsure whether she should trust him completely. Trust, he knew, wasn't something that came quickly in times like these. "Good morning," he said softly. The younger sister woke a moment later, blinking sleep from her eyes. She looked better today, though her injured foot was still wrapped tightly. Samuel handed them a plate with bread and dried fruit. "It's not much," he said, "but it will give you strength." The girls nodded gratefully. They ate quietly, speaking softly to each other in their own language every now and then. Samuel didn't interrupt. He wanted them to feel safe, not pressured. After they finished eating, Samuel crouched beside the younger girl to check her foot again. The swelling had gone down a little, but she still couldn't walk properly. "You need more time to heal," he said. The older sister lowered her eyes. "We must find our family," she said. "Our father. He will be worried." Samuel nodded. "I know." He thought for a moment. "Do you know which direction they were heading?" "East," she answered. "They were moving away from trouble. We followed for some time, but when the night came, we lost the path." Samuel stood up slowly. He looked out across the wide open land, stretching toward the east. It was a long distance, far too long for two young girls to walk, especially with an injury. The land wasn't harsh, but it was lonely and unpredictable. Without guidance, water, or shelter, they would struggle. The older sister seemed to understand his worry. She looked up at him and asked, "Can we stay until my sister can walk?" "Of course," Samuel said, "as long as you need." He meant it, but he also knew their stay would raise questions if anyone stopped by. Still, he couldn't turn them away. The thought of them wandering alone gnawed at him. The hours passed slowly that morning. Samuel fed his chickens, checked the well, and repaired a loose fence post. All the while, he kept thinking about the girls. Their presence reminded him of a simpler time when he used to help neighbors without hesitation. Before droughts, debts, and tensions made everyone nervous. As the sun climbed higher, the girls came out of the barn and watched him work. The younger sister leaned on a wooden stick Samuel had shaped for her to help her walk. The older one stayed close, holding her carefully. "You can rest on the porch," Samuel offered. "There's shade there." They accepted, sitting quietly while he hammered the fence post into place. Occasionally, he glanced over and saw them observing him, their eyes thoughtful. Maybe they wondered why he was helping them, or maybe they were simply trying to understand this new place. Around midday, Samuel walked back to the porch and sat with them. The breeze was warm but gentle, carrying the smell of earth and dry grass. "Do you know how far your family might be?" he asked. The older sister shook her head. "We do not know the distance. We only know the direction." Samuel sighed deeply. "If you walk, it could take many days. And your sister needs rest." The younger girl lowered her eyes, feeling guilty. "I slow us," she whispered. "No," Samuel said gently. "You're just tired." "Anyone would be." She looked up, her eyes soft but sad. Samuel felt a pang in his heart. They were so young, too young to be dealing with the fear of being lost from their family. The day passed quietly. Samuel made soup for lunch, simple but warm. The sisters ate gratefully, their faces relaxing as the warmth filled them. In the afternoon, the younger girl slept, while the older one helped Samuel gather a few supplies from inside the house. As they worked, the older sister finally asked the question that had been resting on her mind. "Why are you helping us? Others might not." Samuel paused, looking into her eyes. "Because you needed help," he answered. "And helping someone in need is the right thing." The girl looked at him thoughtfully, almost as if she were studying the truth of his words. Finally, she nodded with slow understanding. By late afternoon, the heat grew stronger. The land shimmered under the bright sun, and Samuel retreated to the stable to finish a repair he'd started days earlier. His last horse, a gentle brown mare named Willow, stood quietly in her stall, watching him with patient eyes. Willow had been his partner for years. They had crossed miles of land together, hauled supplies, and survived storms. She was more than an animal to him. She was the last strong piece of his ranch that still remained. Samuel brushed her coat gently. "You're all I have left," he said softly. The thought unsettled him. Without Willow, he couldn't travel far for supplies or herd what few animals he had left. She was his lifeline. Losing her would feel like losing the ranch itself. But as he worked, he kept thinking about the sisters. They couldn't walk far, They needed to reach their family safely, and he only had one horse. His mind wrestled with the idea the rest of the afternoon. He tried to think of alternatives, but none came. On foot, the girls would struggle for days. With the horse, they could reach the plains quickly and find their family. That evening, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, Samuel stepped outside the stable and looked toward the porch. The sisters were sitting together, the younger one leaning on the older one's shoulder. Their expressions were tired but calm, as though they finally felt safe for the first time in days. Samuel felt something warm settle inside his chest, a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. As night approached, he helped them settle back in the barn. He checked the younger girl's foot again and gave them blankets to stay warm. Before closing the barn door, he paused. "Tomorrow morning," he said softly, "I'll help you get home." The older sister looked at him with surprise. "How?" she whispered. Samuel didn't answer yet. He only gave a small smile. "Let's rest tonight." But sleep didn't come easily for him. He lay awake in his small room, staring at the ceiling. He knew what he had to do. He would give them Willow, his last horse. It was a difficult decision. Losing the horse meant life on the ranch would become harder. But he kept seeing the image of the young girls trying to walk miles of open land alone. He imagined their tired steps, the long distance, and the uncertainty they carried in their hearts. And in that moment, he realized something very simple. His loss was small compared to their need. The sky outside grew darker as he reached this conclusion. The weight that had been pressing on him all day lifted. He felt a sense of peace, something deep and steady. By the time dawn approached, Samuel was awake and ready. The world outside slowly brightened with the early morning colors. He walked to the barn quietly and opened the door. The two sisters woke instantly, their faces still soft with sleep. "It's time," Samuel said gently. They followed him outside, unsure what he meant. When they reached the stable, Samuel led Willow out and placed a gentle hand on her neck. The older sister's eyes widened. You give us your horse?" Samuel nodded. "She's strong and calm. She'll carry you safely." The younger sister gasped softly, her eyes filling with gratitude. The older one stepped forward, unable to hide her emotion. "But she is your only horse," she whispered. "Yes," Samuel said, "but you need her more." The sisters stared at him, overwhelmed. The older one placed her hand over her heart in a gesture of deep respect. "My father will know what you have done," she said. "We will not forget." Samuel helped them mount Willow carefully. The younger sister held on tightly, her injured foot resting gently at her side. When they were ready, Samuel stepped back. "Ride east," he instructed. "You'll find your family." The older sister nodded, her voice trembling as she said, "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Samuel watched as they rode off into the early morning light. He felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. He had given up something precious, but in return, he felt he had done something truly right. He stood there until the sisters became small shapes on the horizon. He didn't know that this single act of kindness would bring far more to his life than he ever imagined. Samuel stood outside the barn long after the two sisters had disappeared into the soft glow of morning. The air felt cooler than usual, as if the land itself sensed something important had just happened. The sky was still touched with faint colors of dawn, and Samuel kept his eyes on the horizon where the sisters had last been seen. He felt both proud and strangely empty. Willow, his last horse, had been his companion through many hard seasons. Letting her go was not easy, but deep down, he knew he had done the right thing. When the figures finally faded from sight, Samuel let out a long sigh. The ranch looked bigger, somehow quieter, lonelier. Without Willow's steady presence, the place felt incomplete. He walked back toward the house with slow steps, feeling the weight of the morning settle on his shoulders. As he stepped inside, he poured himself a cup of water and sat at the small wooden table, lost in thought. The world outside felt unusually still. The wind had paused, the birds were silent, and even the dry grass seemed unwilling to move. Samuel pushed his chair back and stood up, unable to sit any longer. He stepped outside again, looking around the ranch, the fences, the chicken coop, the open fields stretching far into the distance. Life would be harder now without a horse, but he didn't regret his decision. He spent the next few hours busying himself with chores. Anything to keep his hands occupied. He swept the porch, carried a bucket of feed to the chicken coop, and checked the remaining water lines. Small tasks, tiring tasks, but ones he had done for years. They kept his mind from drifting too far into uncertainty. By midday, the sun climbed higher and warmed the land. Samuel sat on the porch and watched dust drift lazily across the yard. He thought of the sisters again, how tired they had been, how relieved they looked when they rode away. He hoped they would find their family soon. He wondered what their father would think when he learned what happened. Would he believe his daughters? Would he even know who Samuel was? He didn't expect anything in return, of course. Acts of kindness weren't contracts or promises. They were simply things you did because someone needed help. Still, he hoped the girls would reach home safely. He hoped their father would understand the care he had given them. But beyond that, Samuel had no expectations. He never imagined that the next morning would bring something so unexpected and life-changing. As the day passed, the ranch remained quiet. Evening came softly, painting the sky with shades of gold and lavender. The heat of the afternoon faded, and a cool breeze drifted across the land. Samuel cooked a simple meal for himself, a bit of beans and bread, and sat alone at the table. The silence felt heavier than usual, and he missed the sound of Willow shifting in her stall or the quiet rhythm of her hooves on the ground. Before sleeping, he walked to the barn, out of habit, then paused. The empty stall reminded him again of what he had given away. He touched the wooden door and smiled faintly. "Take care of them," he murmured softly, as if Willow could hear him miles away. That night, sleep came slowly. Samuel lay awake, thinking of what tomorrow would bring. Nothing unusual, he imagined, just another day of work under the sun, another day of living with whatever he had left. But the land had other plans. Before the morning light fully broke across the sky, Samuel woke up to a faint trembling in the ground. At first, he thought it was only the wind shaking the old house or perhaps a wagon passing on the distant road. But the sound grew stronger, deep, rhythmic, steady. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a wagon. It was something else. He sat up quickly, listening carefully. The sound grew louder, filling the air with a low, rumbling presence. The walls of the house seemed to vibrate slightly. Samuel stood and stepped outside. The sky was still partly dark, touched with early morning gray, but as he looked across the land, he saw something moving far in the distance, a wide cloud of dust. It rose slowly, spreading across the plains like a soft fog. Samuel narrowed his eyes, struggling to understand what he was seeing. The rumbling grew louder, a rhythmic pattern. Steady and strong. Hoofbeats. Not one horse. Not two. Many. Samuel took a step forward, unsure what to expect. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of the distant sound. He wiped his hands on his jeans and forced himself to stay calm. Curiosity mixed with a hint of worry. Who could be traveling at this early hour? And why in such a large group? The dust cloud grew larger. Shapes began to appear, dark outlines first, then clearer forms as the light grew stronger. Samuel felt his breath catch in his throat. Riders. Dozens of them. No more than dozens. Many more. They moved in a strong, organized formation, the morning sun slowly revealing them as they grew closer. Their horses moved together with remarkable discipline, creating a powerful sight across the plains. Samuel stepped backward slightly. He wasn't afraid, but he was overwhelmed. He had never seen so many riders approaching his ranch, not in all the years he had lived there. As the group came closer, he finally understood who they were. Apache riders. Not just a few, nearly 200 of them. Their arrival felt like a rising wave of presence and authority, a steady force moving toward him with purpose. The horses approached in calm, coordinated motions, their hooves creating a deep echo across the land. Samuel stood still, his hands at his sides, his breathing steady but tight. He didn't run or hide. He simply waited. He knew why they were here. Somehow, deep inside, he already understood. At the front of the riders was a tall figure. His posture was strong, his expression calm, yet deeply focused. As the group slowed and fanned out around the ranch, this man guided his horse forward until he stood directly in front of Samuel. Behind him, riding slowly and safely, were the two sisters. They were seated on Willow's back, just as they had been when they left. But now they looked rested and full of relief. The moment they saw Samuel, their faces softened with recognition. The younger one smiled gently, and the older one lowered her head respectfully. Samuel felt a wave of quiet emotion rise inside him. The tall man who led the riders dismounted with smooth, confident movements. His presence carried quiet authority. Samuel didn't need to be told who he was. He was their father. The father the sisters had spoken about. The father they had been searching for. The father who now stood before Samuel with nearly 200 riders behind him. Samuel kept his posture steady. He didn't know what the man would think. He didn't know if he would be thanked, questioned, or judged. He only knew he had done what felt right. The father walked toward him slowly. The land around them grew silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. The two men met in the open yard, the early morning light touching their faces. Samuel remained calm, though his heart thumped steadily in his chest. The Apache father studied him closely, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then, with quiet dignity, the father placed his hand over his heart. He looked at Samuel with deep understanding, gratitude, and respect. Samuel felt the tension leave his shoulders. Behind them, the riders remained silent, watching with calm eyes, as though witnessing something meaningful. The older sister stepped forward slightly and spoke softly. "We found our father. We told him what you did." Her voice held warmth and respect. Samuel nodded gently, relieved to hear they were safe. The father reached out and touched Samuel's shoulder. His gesture said far more than words. It was a gesture of honor, appreciation, and connection between two very different worlds. Samuel stood quietly, accepting the moment. After everything he had lost, after every challenge he had faced, he never expected that one act of kindness would lead to this day. He had helped two lost daughters, and now their father had come, not with anger, not with suspicion, but with gratitude powerful enough to fill the morning air. Samuel stood in the soft morning light, completely surrounded by the large group of Apache riders. Yet, oddly, he didn't feel threatened. The air held a calm stillness, as if everyone understood the importance of what was happening. The father of the two sisters still had his hand on Samuel's shoulder, a gesture so sincere that Samuel felt a warmth rise in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude, there was something deeper in the man's eyes, something like honor, something like trust. The sisters sat on Willow, watching the moment with bright expressions. The younger sister smiled quietly, shy but happy, while the older one carried herself with dignity, as though proud of what her father was doing. They had told their father everything, Samuel realized, every detail. And now this man, this respected leader, had come all the way here at sunrise to acknowledge it. For a long moment, they simply stood there in silence, understanding each other without speaking. Then the father stepped back a little, giving Samuel space. His daughter translated his words in careful, gentle English. "My father says," she began slowly, "that you cared for his children when they were tired and without help. He says you shared your food, your water, and your kindness." Samuel nodded, humbled. She continued softly. "He says that giving your last horse was something only a man with a generous heart would do. He wants you to know he is grateful." Samuel felt his chest rise and fall with slow breath. "I'm glad they found you," he replied quietly. "That's all that matters." The older sister translated his words back to her father. The man listened, then placed his hand over his heart once more, a gesture of deep sincerity. The riders behind him remained respectfully silent. They were witnesses to this moment, standing tall on their horses, their faces calm and thoughtful. Samuel had never been around so many people from the tribe before, yet he felt no fear, only a sense of peace. After a moment, the father motioned with his hand, and several riders moved forward, carrying bags and supplies. Samuel watched with surprise as they lowered the bags near his porch. One rider stepped forward and opened one of the bags to show its contents. Inside were fresh fruits, dried vegetables, and grains, food Samuel had not seen in months. Another bag contained handmade blankets, carefully woven with beautiful patterns. A third bag held tools made with remarkable craftsmanship, strong wooden handles, polished stones, and ropes thicker than anything Samuel owned. The older sister explained, "These are gifts from our father. He wants to thank you for helping us." Quote, Samuel blinked, surprised. I didn't expect anything." The father spoke again, and the girl translated. "He says kindness should never go unnoticed. When someone protects his children, he wishes to protect that person in return." Samuel looked at the gifts again. They were generous, far more than he had ever given anyone. It almost felt like too much. He shook his head slightly. "I didn't help them to receive gifts," he said softly. "I helped because it was the right thing." The sisters translated his words. Their father listened intently, then nodded with deep respect. He stepped closer again, and for the first time, he spoke a short sentence directly to Samuel, his voice calm and warm. The girl translated with a small smile. He says, "A good heart is worth more than anything." Those words settled into the quiet air like a small blessing. The riders around them shifted slightly, waiting for their leader's next instructions. But none hurried him. They gave him space, understanding that this moment held meaning. The father then looked at Willow, Samuel's last horse, the horse he had given to the sisters. She stood calmly, her ears forward, as if she too understood something special was being shared. Samuel stepped closer to her and gently patted her neck. "She carried them well?" he asked. The younger sister translated his words. Her father smiled. A gentle, approving smile that softened his strong features. He nodded, then spoke again. The girl translated, "He says Willow is strong and loyal. She traveled far without fear." Samuel smiled faintly. "I'm glad." The father looked at Willow for a long moment, then gave a signal with his hand. Two riders brought forward a young, healthy horse from their group, a strong roan with a smooth coat and steady posture. Samuel's eyes widened with surprise. He stepped back a little as the horse was led toward him. The father placed the reins in Samuel's hands. The older sister translated, "My father says he cannot take your last horse. He cannot allow you to walk when you gave so much. He wishes to give you this horse in return." Samuel looked at the animal. The horse was young, strong, and well-trained, far better than any horse he could have afforded on his own. He gently stroked its neck, feeling the smooth coat beneath his fingers. I don't know what to say," Samuel whispered. "You do not need to say anything," the girl replied softly. "You gave from your heart. Now my father gives from his." Samuel took a deep breath, feeling overwhelmed but grateful. He lifted his eyes to the father and nodded with deep respect. The father returned the gesture. The morning sun continued to rise, warming the land. The stillness around them slowly shifted into a soft breeze, carrying with it the scent of earth and grass. The moment felt almost peaceful, like a calm meeting of two different worlds. The father stepped aside, allowing his daughters to come forward. The younger sister reached Samuel first. She held his hand gently, her small fingers warm in his. She looked up with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered in English, "for helping us." Samuel's heart softened. "I'm glad you're safe." Then the older sister approached. She stood tall, her posture steady and dignified. She placed her hand over her heart again, a sign of deep respect. "You showed kindness when others might not," she said. "We will remember you. Our family will remember you." Samuel nodded, touched more than he could express. "Take care of each other," he said. "Stay close to your father." The older sister translated his words to the younger one. who nodded with a small smile. The father then stepped forward one last time. He extended his hand to Samuel not as a leader, but as a man showing appreciation to another. Samuel accepted the handshake, feeling the strength and sincerity in the man's grip. The giant group of riders slowly began to prepare for departure. Horses shifted calmly. The sisters climbed onto Willow once more, settling in comfortably. Samuel stood beside his new roan horse, watching them. The father mounted his own horse and looked down at Samuel with warm eyes. He raised his hand in a gesture of peace and respect. The older sister translated his final message. "My father says, you are a friend to our people. If you ever need help, you will find us nearby." Samuel felt a deep emotion rise inside him. Something like pride, something like gratitude. He nodded slowly. "Tell him I'm honored." The riders slowly began to move. At first, they circled the ranch in a wide arc, calm and steady, almost like a silent farewell. Then, in smooth formation, they headed east, the direction the sisters had come from, their horses moving in graceful rhythm. Samuel stood watching until the dust cloud faded in the distance. The morning sun warmed his face. The land felt alive again, filled with a quiet promise. He looked down at the roan horse standing beside him, calm and strong. He placed a hand on its neck and smiled. He had given away his last horse out of kindness, and in return, he had gained a new friend, a new horse, and something even more meaningful: respect from people he never expected to meet. But more important than any gift was the feeling in his heart. A feeling that sometimes doing the right thing brings back more than you ever imagined. Samuel took a deep breath, looked across the open land of his ranch, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope.